So how you're doing? How's the
Good.
morning feeling?
Morning here.
Okay, you look fresh. It's
Yep.
nice here, but we're just really excited to have you.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here.
So I just gave a small introduction about you, about how you founded Zirtual and how it faced some problems, but still you're continuing to be so good at developing the remote first businesses.
Cool. Thank you.
So I'll jump right in with all the questions that I decided to ask you. Is that fine?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, what kind of student were you, Maren? What were you thinking when you were just a teenager? What plans did you have for your life?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was a particularly good student. Um, I was more interested, and I'm just gonna pop on my headphones real quick. I didn't realize there was a lag. Yeah, I was an all right student. I loved writing. I liked creative. School kind of goes with structured learning. It was difficult. Do you hear a lag, or is it just me?
I think it's pretty fine. I think I
Okay,
get.
cool. There's weird background for me. Yeah, so that was it.
Is like something? Is it the background noise or what is it?
There's just I'm hearing a repeat on my side. I'm hearing my own echo.
Oh, maybe you could just go out and then you can come back in, and then we can try
Yeah,
that.
1 sec. How about now?
Is this fine now?
I think so. Yep. I
Yeah.
still hear some echo, but I'll try to turn mine down and go through it. Cool.
Okay, do let me know if there's like an issue, and maybe I can try plugging in my earphones or something like that. We tested it better, before, but we weren't facing this issue, so I don't know.
Okay.
Is it good?
Yeah, I think so. I still hear myself a little bit. Yeah, if you have AirPods or earphones, that probably would take it away.
Okay, could you just give me a minute?
Absolutely.
Is it better now?
Let me see. Yeah, much better.
Okay. I'm so sorry.
Awesome. No problem.
Okay. So yeah, we were just hearing about you being a student.
Yeah, as a student. So I was an okay student, but I don't think I was particularly motivated by like the structure of school. I wasn't great at test taking and things like that. Luckily, when I was a kid, I was homeschooled for a chunk of my time by my mother, and that was, I would say, a better way of learning for me. And then in college, I did English literature and psychology. And I really enjoyed the psych classes. I enjoyed the reading and writing part of the English side. But yeah, again, like the structure of school didn't do it for me as much.
So I did a bit research on you, and you always dreaded the 9 to 5 when I think you did an internship or.
Yeah, I created a blog when I was right after I left school. I dropped out my senior year just because I didn't really see the point anymore, and I was already starting to work for myself. So I created that blog, Escaping the 9 to 5, kind of just to document the way I was going to approach my career, I guess, differently than a traditional. aspect.
So, what was that point when you realized that, the blogging could be the way that you could, you know, every business has a problem that they're solving, right? So, the point where you thought that, the virtual assistants could satisfy the problem that the busy entrepreneurs are facing, and then you mapped it to how did that come along through your blogging?
Because I was able to, so I was just documenting my businesses and what I was trying. And one of the things I was doing was leveraging virtual assistants myself to help me build sites, manage customers, things like that. So I would talk about that on my blog and explain, exactly what I was doing. The highs and lows, and I would get a lot of feedback from my readers on wanting help hiring and managing their own virtual assistants. So after a few years of that, I realized, oh, this is actually a business opportunity. And that was when I decided to kind of take a jump, move to San Francisco, and see if I could make it a startup, quote unquote. Because before that, all of my businesses had been smaller online businesses.
So you've been like you studied English lit and you've been really good at communicating yourself through writing. So when you became a CEO and a founder, how did that change? You must have had a lot of communication problems coming up since it was a virtual remote work model. So how did you overcome all that? What were the
Um,
processes? What made it work?
I mean, I think one of the great things about fully distributed companies or distributed teams is if you're a person who enjoys writing more than maybe speaking or gets your ideas out that way better, it's super helpful because instead of doing a daily stand up or something, I write an email to my team or we're in Slack a lot. So I'm able to think through and communicate that way. And my team does the same. So I would say the communication issues that arise remotely are usually around the written word. So you get an understanding of you get a better understanding of how tone comes across writing versus speaking.
Yes.
We rely heavily on emojis. And then, I mean, at the end of the day, the biggest thing is just over communicating because and not assuming someone gets something that maybe you would understand if we were physically together and you could see tone and sense. Um, yeah, but I mean, it takes a little more work in the beginning, but I actually think it creates a super solid structure for growth. And then the other cool thing is everything you document, you can link back to. So like we use Notion and Google Docs and everything. If we do something more than once, we document it. So then it's like, oh, how do you do X? And you just direct them to the link. So
So you
everyone,
documented all the processes.
yep, it's easier for people to be on the same page when everything is documented.
So when you dropped out, it was not the norm, right? It's not the norm. You always think that you need a college degree and then you need to get a certain job, but
Yep.
you were a different mindset since the beginning. How did you have that courage and the patience to keep making it?
I mean, there was there wasn't a lot of courage because I was a mediocre student. I went to a state school. I wasn't like at Harvard or something. So I was like, my English literature degree at UNR isn't going to do anything great for me if like on my resume. So it was more the idea of kind of I'm going to bet on myself and take this different path. Like I have a better chance of being successful on this different path versus following kind of the get a degree, get a job, go up the career ladder. I think by the time I was in college, that was starting to be questioned. Um, yeah, and I'm impulsive, so I was like, screw it.
So your impulsiveness ended up becoming virtual. The Zircals that got so famous and it had so much internet coverage. I just had that one point. I know I'm jumping to the end before I'm like building the climax, but
Yeah, for sure.
The fact that even like when I was doing the research, everything was about. I think it was around in 2015 when Zirtual went to the height, and at the highest point, I think you faced the
Hmm.
doubt, right? And at that moment, when you were deciding on making the decision on sending out the email to all your employees, during that time, who was there? What was your motivation? What made you take that step? And what what was going through your mind at that point of time?
Yeah, I mean, who was there with me was like my co-founders and my core team, who we all worked together from the beginning, which was awesome, and we're still all close now. But I would say, in terms of motivation, I mean, it was just there wasn't any other option. We were supposed to get funding. One of the investors uh, tranched their investment at the last minute and then required everybody else to pony up before they would do that. And with most things in life, venture capital is kind of, people are doing things in tandem. So if one person gets spooked, everybody else gets spooked
Yes.
too.
Yes. Yeah.
So that investment actually just dried up, disappeared. Um, we didn't have the option of keeping going. So we knew that if we didn't tell people don't clock in for work on Monday, we wouldn't have enough cash to pay them past that. And that was the conservative thing to do. I don't know if it necessarily was the right thing to do. An older, wiser Maren might have spent a few weeks hustling to like raise money from different people on like a lower valuation, but I don't know if that would have been able to happen or not. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. However, like you were really attached to Searchful, and you did it. I read the quote. I was just like your own baby being taken away from you. But I see you again, a founder, a CEO of Indie.co, but you haven't given up. How did you get the confidence, and then how did you know that this time you won't, this certain thing wouldn't happen again, or something else wouldn't come your way, and you still kept going?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the thing is, um, it's, you know, things either are they're going to either break you or they can help, be foundational building blocks in your story. And I think that's everybody has that choice. And obviously there's people that have gone through much harder things. But at the end of the day, you can't control everything that happens to you. All you can control is your attitude and like your thought process. So I kind of made the choice, not out of any deep wisdom, but just like, well, this is either going to destroy me or I'm going to use this as I'm going to take a bunch of hard won lessons for this and apply it next time. Because there's a great quote about success being a poor teacher. And you really do learn a ton of things when you fall on your face, because you learn so many lessons through that. So, uh, the way I approached it was, well, what other options do I have? I've kind of gone this far down this path. Why not? Why not try to use what I've learned and try again and start something again. And I did work for other companies for a few years in between, at Calm and then at a company called Rome, doing operations and kind of getting my sea legs back, so to speak. But after that, I mean, honestly, I think when it comes to like founding things, it's just you either have a driving desire to do it or you don't. I don't think anyone should start something unless they're pretty much kind of obsessed with the idea and obsessed with doing it, because you have to have that to have the follow through. Because the idea and everything is romantic, but then the actual grind for the next 5 years is always harder.
So I think it's a matter of trust when you go to somebody to pitch your idea, and then you go like, that was a breaking point, right? But then again, gaining that trust, how did that happen? How did you convince people around you to start over again?
Um, I mean, I think taking a few years working for someone else was really helpful. It gave me good insight. And then um, I don't know. I mean, honestly, probably just being really honest and open, being like, this is the ways, this is what I see could have gone better. This is what I would change. This is the what I've learned, and this is the new idea I'm chasing from that. And you kind of, as if I've been relatively honest and open about that, like online and writing, and I think a small amount of people are like, "Ooh, I want to do that journey with you," and that's kind of your tribe, so to speak.
So, I'm sorry, I forgot the question that I just had.
No problem.
So you just started over again, right? And I noticed that Avra Talent and Indie.co have the same layout, and they're focusing on the professional virtual workers, right? So at first you decided not to contract with independent contractors, and you decided to onboard employees, like full-time employees, right? On Zirtual, and that is what costed you a
I
lot.
lost
To,
I lost you there. Say that one more time.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, just repeat what you said. It cut out.
So basically, in during the last days of Zirtual, right? Like back in 2015, you decided not to have independent contractors anymore. What was the insight for that? Why did that happen? Why did it go to a full-time employee model?
So back then, there was a lot of heat from the Department of Labor on misclassification of, in the states, independent contractors versus employees, and we were trying to be on the right side of that by making people employees versus independent contractors. In retrospect, that was a mistake. We should have just changed the model to make 100% sure that they were properly independent contractors. But we were, yeah, that was a kind of gut call on like, this is what the right thing to do, but it wasn't thinking through multiple steps in the future.
So what works now that did not work back then?
Um, so I think one of the things I've learned is really understanding what you need as a company and then building incredibly lean teams around that. So sometimes an employee is what you need, and that's amazing. And other times you have very specific roles or tasks or projects you need done, and you can lean on independent contractors. That's what we do with Inde. That's what we do with Avra, and it allows our costs to be lower, and it also allows our people to have the freedom of, sometimes they work more, sometimes they work less. We work a lot with moms and people that are taking care of a family or need some flexibility in their day. So I think that, I mean, and obviously this is a US thing only, but we have two types of classifications: independent contractors and employees. I really think in the future, in the next 10 years, we'll see a third classification, which still has that flexibility and maybe is not full-time, but has more of the ability to offer benefits and things like that. That would be really nice.
I was noticing when I was doing the research about Zirtual and about you that there is this maybe there's an inclination of media focusing on what went wrong instead of focusing on what went right and what's going on now. So why do you think that is so? I mean, I know you've done a better job now. You've done a better job.
Um,
You're doing so much now, and I think this is Avra and India are doing way better. But why is that inclination still there? I mean, why is it that even right? I'll be honest. We found out about you through Zirtual's collapse in 2015, right? 2015, 2020, it's like another 5 years. So what would it be that you would say now that would, I'm not saying that it was it's a shadow, but still, that is how you're just getting the attraction, right? So like on a positive side, let's just talk about that. What would, if you would like to change that somehow, and you would like to get known for like a new title or new image, what would that be ideally?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're working on at Indie, really focusing on how we can help empower remote professionals. And by putting all my energy and working on that, like the goal is that is impactful and can positively impact, millions down the line. So I think I guess I don't worry as much about I don't worry about the past. I don't think a lot in terms of regrets. Instead, I'm very kind of future focused. Like this has happened, this is out there, and then how do I like to think in terms of like impact, like if, how can I impact more people and make and just yeah, that's kind of the way I think about it. The past to me is just kind of the past.
So you're working with a lot of moms and people who are working on flexible hours, and entire thing is flexible, including I'm pretty sure the pay scale to the timings and to everything. How is your experience working with women and empowering them so far?
I mean, yeah, I mean, at Zirtual, I think we were about 80% women. At Avra, we're like 90%. It's not something that I went out to do. But at the same time, just I think maybe the benefits, the work, the flexibility has been something that really attracts phenomenal females who need that flexibility for whatever reason, or maybe took 5 or 10 years off the labor force and now are coming back. I think that's one amazing thing about remote work is it really is a great equalizer.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's the opportunities there, technology, the internet, the ability to work remote, the ability to work while you're raising a family or whatever it is just phenomenal. Also remote, one of the nice things is it really is results based. It doesn't matter a lot of the biases fall away when people just see the results of the work. And I love that about the opportunity that working remotely gives.
So you're working with the majority of the women, right? You must, even though it's a professional setup, you must come across a lot of personal problems that they face. And I'm sure all the insights that we had, we had when we had that initial talk, you were talking about independence and freedom and what our goals are. And how do you, why do you think that there are so many women out there who are doing so much, and what makes them achieve their own goals? What kind of goals are they struggling for? Like our Odetta is also a virtual based work model, right? And we're over here, we're working for different things. We are all in different paths, and we're on different stages of our careers. Some of us sometimes span out, they start their own startup, but we're all figuring out. How do you think that we should prioritize ourselves, and how to like stop running after money and then realizing our own dreams? How does all that work out eventually?
Yeah, the way I think about it is in terms of, so the reason Indie's name INDE is, from the word independent. And I think what's really important is I think independence is a lot more important than any of the other trappings of success, so to speak. So there's kind of, if you think in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of need, there's like a hierarchy of independence. Physical independence, if you're in jail or prosecuted, that's a very basic one. So having just kind of that autonomy to move around and do what you need to do. And then there's financial independence, there's intellectual independence, being able to think for yourself. That also goes into like freedom of speech, freedom of press. But one of the things that we really focus on, and I think is incredibly important for women, is to be able to be financially independent. I mean, so much of um, the inequality we see in the world is because that imbalance of power. So instead of trying to figure out how to be rich or how to have all these external trappings, how can we instead think, what can we do to have this level of independence? Because once you have that, so much of your life is your own. And I think that's a combination of figuring out what you have to give the world, and like where your unique genius lies, where you can be the best of the best, and then how to market yourself properly, how to position yourself, how to find that work. Because there are always companies and people who desperately need amazing people on their team, but there's a mismatch of uh, finding that connection. So one thing I'm doing right now is we're writing a book all around about going remote, and how to stand out in crowded marketplaces, how to get a job that you love, and how to really take control of your career by working fully remote. And I think that's part of it, like understanding how to market yourself, find the jobs and land the jobs. And then the other aspect, which is a little outside of our sphere, but I think it's really important, is thinking in terms of lifestyle. Like, what do you really need? How can you minimize your personal burn, so to speak, so you are putting out together savings, so you are working towards that financial independence, versus working and just towards material things.
We talked about this a bit, you gave us this high level intro to this, that you would like to talk about this, right? There's this one question that had been on my mind. When did this insight develop inside you? Was it during this virtual experience or even before that?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I think I've been passionate about and thinking about for over a decade. One of the things that, yeah, like even with virtual, I didn't like the fact that because of external factors, all these people lost their work overnight. And instead I was like, how can we better take control of our own career? That's something that weighed on me and I thought about a lot. And then even just personally, when I moved to San Francisco originally, I had that kind of same startup dream that everybody has, is, launch a startup, make a bunch of money, like get on the news, whatever. And then I realized, as I've grown up and got more mature, is that it's not, making a lot of money isn't like that, isn't the goal, and it's not as important as having independence, is having enough that you are in control of your own life. And that is, it doesn't have to be a ton, and for different people and then there's the idea of location independence. What is barely getting by in New York City is living really well in Puerto Rico or Indonesia or something like that. So I think that's where the idea of location independence comes in too. You're like, hey, maybe you're a writer and you know what you'll earn, and you will submit pieces, some will get sold, some won't. But you can take your income, you can net it out over 12 months, project what it's going to be, and say, okay, I can struggle in Austin, Texas or Hong Kong, or I can have a great life in Ubud, Bali, and I'm going to choose that. And that's its own idea. And, that leads into independence. Like, you can be financially independent in different ways, in different places in the world. And with more connectivity, we have those options.
But there are like some certain cultural implications of living a certain lifestyle. How do you
True.
come? How did you, like, you have been, when we talk to you, you exude your own mindset out. No, it's not coming in, it's like inside out. And that is how you've developed your own community, your own tribe, as you say. So how does that happen? How do you get the confidence to, because I do, like, it's human psyche, right? That you initially, when you're just growing up, you try to absorb everything, and then you probably find yourself that, oh, this is how I fit in. But you were not fitting in, you just stood out, and you just made your own path. How would you advise the women around us to maybe do the same, or maybe do something on the similar path, or a similar track?
I mean, I think the biggest part is just thinking long and hard about what you really want, and what your goals are and what your personal core values are. I think that is absolutely, I figured that out kind of in reverse. Like, I knew that I didn't fit into the traditional molds, but I spent a decade kind of thrashing around trying to figure out what that meant. And only recently did I realize that, by setting your personal core values and then understanding your goals and what drives you and what you really want, being brutally honest with yourself. That's like the foundational level. And then everything gets layered on from there. And then depending on, there's certain, we can be in situations, we can be in communities, we can be in cultures where that is less able to happen. But then you kind of figure out your rounds and you figure out, is this like a make or break? Is this like I need to completely make a break and move, or is this like, hey, I'm going to start standing up for myself a little bit, or I'm going to work in the system and figure out how I can still meet my goals, be happy, and fulfill my personal core values. So I think that's the most important part. It's different for each person, but if you start at that foundational level, it's just a game changer.
So you, for example, you're struggling so much. You're what you want. You fight, right? You fight for that. Not everything works out just like that, because just because you want it, life doesn't just give it to you. So you fought your way, you got it, and then eventually there comes a point, and then you go like, maybe this is not the end. Maybe, because there's this always this behavior we have in the human behavior. We have that chase, the power to chase and then just grow more. And when you do that, and maybe you want something that you did not want back then, and then to accept that you want it right now, how do you incorporate that? Because then again, your entire world has changed to the point that it does not go back. It's not as flexible. But
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of like I do a yearly exercise where I look at the last year, I look at what my personal core values are, I look at what my goals are, and just kind of assess, like, is this what I am I it's like the idea of how people used to navigate the seas before GPS or technology. They'd look at the map, they'd travel for a while, they'd check the map, they'd look around them, and then they would course correct. And I think that's super important. And then being kind to yourself and not beating yourself up if if things change. I mean, we're in a time right now with this global pandemic that a lot has changed. Certain businesses are going to go under. People are stressed, are underemployed, all this stuff. So, this is something that is out of in the individual's control. But instead of, I guess, freaking out about it. So like a good example is right before this hit, we were starting our fundraising for Inde. And really quickly, like that has just dried up. And it, may reopen in a month or two. People may be investing in the fall. I don't know. But instead of holding that firm and being like, we've got to do this, and that would have, maybe we spend 500 hours just spinning our wheels. Me and my co-founder are kind of like, okay, how can we continue to pursue our vision, but just bootstrap it instead? And so that's why we're creating this course on getting hired and thriving in remote environments, because we're like, we know people need this. There's a huge wave of unemployment coming, and people are now, everyone's experiencing the some of the benefits of working remotely. We are in a specific awesome position to teach people how to position themselves, find remote work, get hired, and we have the community to support them. We're going to make that an ebook and course product, and we're going to sell that. And that will be, and so we went from being like, all right, we're going to raise money and build this product, to, all right, we're going to go back to the drawing board. We're going to build a product. We're just going to do it a lot more analog than we originally thought. And at the same time, that also tests our thesis. So yeah, I just think it's like being able to be agile and course correct.
on the note of building our own selves and branding ourselves, and then the point that from like there are a lot of things that when we're getting interviewed, we're getting judged for. We're for our body language, for our verbal language, for a lot of other things. The written communication does not go in in any of those steps. So what are the few things that you do take into consideration when you're hiring somebody virtually?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest ones is the written communication. So how people communicate. Um, I think it's incredible. So one of the things we're building at Indie, and people can go and request an invite right now. We're in the process of building it out. Is it shifting from the resume to like a landing page. We call it a portfolio that highlights your specific what sets you apart and what makes you a great fit for a job. So what I like to tell people when they're applying for roles is, first of all, it's a process. It's like any other process. It takes work. You have to work the system, but if you do it consistently, you will find success. So instead of so it's like really understanding each job you apply for, how like what's their pain point and how can I solve it, and how am I specifically set up to do that. And then when you're creating your application process, so to speak, like gearing it towards that. So whether you're applying, applying for my company is different than applying for a different company. And I think often um, we've just been trained to, like submit an application and wait to see what happens, versus being really proactive and reaching out to hiring managers, putting together a resume, or building your own professional profile site on Squarespace or Landon, and then submitting that. And I mean, putting together a Loom video showing your work, depending if you're experienced versus junior, shifting around your resume, quote unquote, so it is focused on what you can bring to the table. You might be, you might not have a lot of experience, but maybe you have some amazing references and awesome side projects you can point at. Then lead with that, versus if you have 20 years of experience, maybe you're like, hey, this is what I'm going to lead with. Just it's like personalizing your approach. It's the same exact strategies as product marketing, but realizing that you're the product. What is your positioning? How are you marketing yourself?
So sometimes when women, especially, they have this responsibility of becoming moms. So when they go for maternal leave, sometimes it spans from as low as 6 months to 6 years. So when they come back, they want to pursue their careers again, and then when they think that their lives is settled enough that the children are a bit stable, and they can make things work, and when they go to work, there's this big lag that most of the employers are like very particular about. That why is there this big lag? Are you still as functional, as good, as motivated as you were before? Maybe you were saying very big words, but are you in touch with the same, like the
Yep.
latest technologies? Or how do you, what would you suggest to the moms who are just coming back into the industry these days?
I think one of the great things to do is, depending on what your industry is, like say if you're getting into technology, or if you're going to work at a tech company, is to get up to date with everything so you can really show that. So there's all these free courses that the technology tools a lot of people use. So HubSpot, Asana, whatever it is, Zapier, you can take courses through them and you can get certified. And I think doing that, right as you're starting to go out to the job market, it taking courses online and then actually leading with that is a great way to get heard above the noise, and a great way to be like, yeah, the last 5 years I had a kid, and I took some time off to get him or her set up, whatever. But during that time, especially in the last year, as I've been prepping to get back into the, insert your market, I've taken these certifications, I've learned this, I've gotten up to speed on the new technology, just really becoming a student of what's like on the cutting edge. So you show that you're adaptable and that you're a learner and that you're growing. I think that's incredibly impressive to employers.
So now we're talking about certifications and courses. So I wanted to ask this. I think you'd be the best person to ask this. Uh, Degree, certifications, and courses. How would you prioritize them?
I think right now, and especially in the future, what matters, especially with remote work, but with any kind of work, what matters more than anything is results. That's all I care about. And I think as as the world of work shifts, I think that's going to be more important. So if there is a way, the single most important thing for anyone to do when they're looking for work is if there's a way to show your work, that's phenomenal. Um, Whether it's a test project, whether it's you building something, that is just huge. I mean, I've seen people reach out to employers and be like, hey, I'd love to work for you for 5 hours for free. Or I'd love to, what I used to do, I was doing copywriting for some hotels and I wanted to do that. So I literally would go onto hotel websites. I would rewrite the copy they had, and then I wrote a blog post about how I would change it and how I would reposition it. I published the post and I sent it to the hiring manager and like the director of marketing or whatever. And I maybe did that 5 or 10 times, and a few people actually reached out and wanted to interview me to get some work done. I think that's the most important part. So degree, it does matter in some ways, but I think in the future it will matter less. If you can solve for trust, that's the biggest thing. So if someone trusts you can do the work well, if they can see that, that's just massive. And the great thing is, especially, you know, in times of coronavirus, or if we have a lot of time staying at home, we've got the time to build out things to show our trust. I think the professionals that do well in the future will be the ones that take their career into their own hands versus people that kind of more feel like the old way of thinking, like, I did this, now I deserve a job, instead being like, no, I'm going to really, it's like being your own little, you are your own product, you're like the CEO of yourself or something.
So, for like women, I would say there are a lot of other struggles that they go through even when they're working from home. What is that one thing that you would say that, for example, this many women who were from, how I can say this in a sense that, there were circumstances that they overcame, right? So what is, or were there any success stories? Were there any stories that are there any numbers that you'd like to quote that this many women got work even though they were having trouble getting back into the industry again, and this is something that other women from other communities can do as well?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any numbers off the top of my head, but I do know that more and more we're seeing employment with men and women, getting the numbers getting closer. We're also seeing, and it's early data, that women-led teams and women-led companies outperform their male peers from like the 20-year data sets we're looking at now. I think at the end of the day, I think it's just, it really comes down to just as an individual making the choice that life is not fair, but I'm going to figure out a way to get the, like, level the playing field for myself. um yeah, I think that's the most important thing.
For your personal self, Maren, what are your next 5-year goals and what do you dream to be ahead?
Yeah, I mean, my 5-year goals really focus around how can we positively impact millions of people through Indie. Specifically, how can we help speed up the acceleration and adoption of remote work. I think it's one of the great equalizers. Um, and I think it just has a lot of amazing potentials to positively impact people all over the world, and to help people find more meaningful work. So when I think of the next 5 years, like, I want Indie to be, when people think of remote employment, that's where they go. And I really want to focus on it from an individual standpoint of how can we empower individuals versus um, I guess versus kind of thinking more in terms of like, how can we help companies? I think we can help companies by empowering individuals. And at the end of the day, that's what's the most impactful.
So when you're trying to match women or like men or your workforce to the job at hand or any task that needs to be done, there's this biasness that women do not do so well in tech as men do. How do you help both the parties match, especially if they're like you have a lot of women on your hand, right? And you know that this is a job that a particular women, and there might be some biases that the company has. So how do you think that we can overcome that? And
I mean, yeah,
women market themselves better than
I
they.
think it, yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to just kind of what we were saying talking about before is in terms of is proving it in results. You know, it's impossible to overcome another person's biases, but you can play to what people want in their goals. And if you know their goal is to get something designed or to have a product managed, and you can show why you're a great fit, that's that is the biggest win. I think by just backing into it and really thinking through what does this look like, what does this company want and what does this individual want, and then figuring out how you can solve those pain points. So again, it's approaching job searches like we approach businesses. What's the pain point? How do we solve it? How do we market ourselves? What's our positioning?
So, one last question related to this. What are the three top qualities you look in your employees when you're hiring a workforce?
Um, yeah, I mean, driven, like self-motivated is really important. Strong communicator is really important. And then I would say I would definitely probably say tech savvy. That's incredibly important. And when I say tech savvy, I don't mean you have to code. I mean that you're up on the newest technology and that you can pick up things pretty quickly. So maybe that's actually more important than tech savvy, just the ability to pick up new skills and new tools quickly. And that adaptability is huge and will only continue to be more important.
On an ending note, Maren, what makes you smile the most?
Um, Man, I would say probably the little things. I have a kitten who's around here somewhere. He's making me smile a lot.
And like, if you when you wake up, what's the one thing that you look forward to?
Um, every day I take a walk, even though we're sheltered in place, and I take my walk to work, which is just a walk back to my office. And I really enjoy that. That's a small thing, but it really makes me happy.
And now that everybody's in quarantine and they're figuring out how to work from home, what's one thing that you would tell them to keep going through?
I would tell them to check out our work from home guide on Inde.co. We published it a few weeks ago. And yeah, it has a smattering of advice and tools and hacks.
Yeah, it's very nicely placed and it's very readable. I just went through that. It's really good.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for your time, Maren. It was really, really,
Absolutely.
our audience really loves you and they're just streaming in their comments. I think I can download this and then send it to you in the email.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if anyone has any questions for me, I'm super available on Twitter or email. Twitter is the easiest place.
Thank you so much for taking the time out for us. And I really, really loved it. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody, for listening to us.